Donald Trump's approach to foreign policy often emphasizes economic interests. His strategies are deeply rooted in his business background, where the bottom line and tangible returns are paramount. This perspective has shaped his views on international relations, where he often prioritizes financial gains over traditional diplomatic protocols. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine presents a unique opportunity for Trump to apply his economic-centric approach. The situation is complex, with geopolitical tensions running high, but Trump sees beyond the immediate conflict. He identifies potential economic benefits that could be harnessed amidst the chaos. Ukraine is rich in natural resources, including vast reserves of oil and gas. Trump views these resources as significant leverage in negotiations. By tapping into these assets, he believes the U.S. can secure a stronger foothold in the region, both economically and strategically. He proposes using these resources as collateral in international deals. This means that Ukraine's natural wealth could be used to back financial agreements, ensuring that investments are safeguarded and returns are maximized. It's a strategy that mirrors high-stakes business deals, where assets are often used to secure loans and investments. This strategy involves securing U.S. investments in Ukraine's reconstruction. By investing in rebuilding efforts, the U.S. can not only aid in stabilizing the region but also ensure that American companies benefit from lucrative contracts and business opportunities. By leveraging these assets, Trump aims to ensure a return on investment for the U.S. This approach is designed to create a win-win situation where both Ukraine and the U.S. see tangible benefits. For Trump, it's about making sure that American interests are always at the forefront. This approach reflects his business-oriented worldview. Trump has always been a deal-maker, and he brings this mentality to his foreign policy strategies. He believes that by treating international relations like business transactions, more efficient and profitable outcomes can be achieved. It prioritizes tangible gains over traditional geopolitical concerns. For Trump, the success of a policy is measured by its economic returns rather than its adherence to diplomatic norms or long-standing alliances. However, critics argue this approach is short-sighted. They contend that focusing solely on economic gains can overlook the broader implications of foreign policy decisions. Critics warn that such a narrow focus can lead to unintended consequences. They warn it could destabilize the region further. The conflict in Ukraine is not just about resources, it's about people, sovereignty, and regional stability. Critics argue that exploiting the situation for economic gain could exacerbate tensions and prolong the conflict. Exploiting Ukraine's resources for profit while it remains vulnerable raises ethical questions. There are concerns about the environmental impact of resource extraction and the potential exploitation of vulnerable communities. Ethical considerations are often sidelined in favor of economic benefits. This strategy also risks alienating European allies. Many European nations have a vested interest in Ukraine's stability and may view Trump's approach as self-serving. This could strain alliances and create rifts within international coalitions. It diminishes the importance of democratic values and the rule of law. By prioritizing economic gains, there's a risk of undermining the principles that many nations hold dear. The balance between economic interests and ethical considerations is delicate, and Trump's strategy walks a fine line. Trump advocates for a reduced U.S. military footprint globally. He believes that the United States has been overextended in its military commitments for far too long, and that it is time to reassess and recalibrate its role on the world stage. By reducing the number of troops stationed abroad, Trump aims to bring more of the military personnel back home, focusing on national security and domestic priorities. He consistently criticizes European allies for not contributing enough to their own defense. Trump has often pointed out that many NATO member countries do not meet the alliance's defense spending target of 2% of their GDP. He argues that the burden of maintaining global security should not fall disproportionately on the United States, and that European nations need to step up and invest more in their own military capabilities. In the context of Ukraine, Trump envisions a scenario where European troops take the lead. He believes that European countries, particularly those in close proximity to Ukraine, have a more immediate and vested interest in the region's stability. By having European forces at the forefront, Trump argues that it would not only reduce the strain on U.S. military resources, but also encourage European nations to take greater responsibility for their own security. This approach would limit direct U.S. military involvement. Trump envisions a more supportive role for the U.S., providing intelligence, logistical support, and strategic guidance rather than being the primary force on the ground. This shift would allow the U.S. to focus on other global threats and challenges, while still maintaining a presence and influence in key regions. Trump argues that European nations have a greater stake in Ukraine's stability. Given their geographical proximity and historical ties, European countries are directly impacted by the events in Ukraine. Trump believes that this proximity should translate into a greater commitment to ensuring peace and stability in the region. They should therefore shoulder a larger share of the responsibility. By taking on a more significant role, European nations would not only demonstrate their commitment to regional security, but also strengthen their own defense capabilities. This, in turn, would contribute to a more balanced and equitable distribution of defense responsibilities among NATO members. This proposal has faced resistance from both Europe and within the U.S. European leaders are concerned about the potential risks and challenges of taking on a more prominent role in regional security. Meanwhile, some U.S. policymakers and military officials worry that reducing American involvement could undermine the country's global influence and leadership. European nations are wary of provoking Russia. The presence of Russian forces near Ukraine and the ongoing tensions in the region make European countries cautious about taking actions that could escalate the situation. They fear that a more assertive stance could lead to increased hostilities and further destabilize the region. They also face logistical and financial constraints. Many European countries have limited defense budgets and resources, making it challenging to significantly increase their military capabilities. Additionally, logistical challenges such as coordinating joint operations and ensuring interoperability among different national forces add to the complexity of taking on a larger role. Critics within the U.S. argue that withdrawing American leadership creates a vacuum. They contend that the U.S. has been a stabilizing force in many regions, and that reducing its presence could lead to increased instability and conflict. These critics believe that American leadership is essential for maintaining global order, and that stepping back could embolden adversaries. This vacuum could be filled by adversaries like Russia or China. Both countries have been expanding their military capabilities and influence, and a reduced U.S. presence could provide them with opportunities to assert their power and challenge American interests. The potential for increased competition and conflict underscores the importance of carefully considering the implications of any changes to U.S. military strategy. Transparency and accountability are paramount in Trump's view of foreign aid. He believes that U.S. funds provided to Ukraine should be meticulously tracked. Trump insists on rigorous financial audits to ensure these funds are used appropriately. This emphasis on financial scrutiny stems from his skepticism of foreign aid. He argues that it is often mismanaged and ineffective. While the need for accountability is widely acknowledged, critics argue that excessive bureaucracy can hinder aid delivery. They emphasize the urgency of the situation in Ukraine. Delays caused by complex audits could have dire consequences. The World Bank and IMF shaping Ukraine's economic future. Trump sees international financial institutions like the World Bank and IMF playing a crucial role in Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. He believes these institutions should provide loans and guidance. This assistance would help rebuild Ukraine's economy and infrastructure. Trump's vision for Ukraine involves it becoming a reliable economic partner. He sees this as essential for long-term stability and prosperity. However, the involvement of these institutions is not without its critics. Some argue that the conditions attached to loans can be overly burdensome. They can lead to austerity measures that harm vulnerable populations. Others express concerns about transparency and accountability within these institutions. A comprehensive audit. Transparency in U.S. aid. Transparency in the allocation and utilization of U.S. aid has always been a topic of significant importance. In recent years, this issue has gained even more attention, especially with the increasing amounts of aid being sent to various countries around the world. Trump has repeatedly called for a comprehensive audit of all U.S. aid provided to Ukraine. His calls for transparency are rooted in his broader political philosophy of America First, which emphasizes prioritizing American interests and ensuring that taxpayer money is spent wisely. This audit aims to provide complete transparency. By meticulously examining where and how the funds are being used, the audit seeks to uncover any inefficiencies or misappropriations. This level of scrutiny is intended to build trust among the American public. He wants to assure the American people that their tax dollars are being used effectively. The goal is to demonstrate that every dollar sent abroad is accounted for and is contributing to the intended purpose, whether it be humanitarian aid, military assistance, or economic support. This stance resonates with his base, who are often skeptical of foreign aid. Many of his supporters believe that the U.S. should focus more on domestic issues rather than spending large sums of money overseas. They see the audit as a necessary step to ensure accountability. It reinforces his image as a tough negotiator who demands accountability. By pushing for this audit, Trump is positioning himself as a leader who is not afraid to challenge the status quo and demand transparency, even if it means scrutinizing long-standing policies and practices. Critics argue that this demand for an audit is politically motivated. They suggest that the timing and focus of the audit are designed to serve Trump's political interests rather than a genuine concern for transparency. They point to the fact that similar audits have not been demanded for aid to other countries. This selective scrutiny raises questions about the true intentions behind the audit and whether it is being used as a tool for political gain. This focus on Ukraine, they argue, is intended to undermine support for the country. By casting doubt on the effectiveness and integrity of the aid being sent to Ukraine, critics believe that Trump is trying to weaken the resolve of those who support continued assistance to the country. It also serves as a way to attack his political opponents. By framing the audit as a necessary measure for transparency, Trump can criticize his opponents for not demanding similar scrutiny, thereby painting them as less concerned about accountability and the proper use of taxpayer money. The debate over the audit of U.S. aid to Ukraine is part of a larger conversation about the role of the United States in global affairs. As the world's largest economy and a major geopolitical player, the U.S. has a long history of providing aid to countries in need. However, the effectiveness and transparency of these aid programs have always been subjects of debate. While some argue that foreign aid is a moral obligation and a strategic necessity, others believe that it should be more closely monitored to ensure that it serves American interests. The call for an audit of U.S. aid to Ukraine is just one example of this ongoing debate. Ultimately, the push for transparency in U.S. aid is about more than just numbers and audits. It's about ensuring that the United States remains a responsible and effective global leader, one that uses its resources wisely and upholds the values of accountability and transparency. Resource extraction, fueling U.S. arms manufacturing. Ukraine possesses valuable mineral resources essential for various industries, including arms manufacturing. Trump recognizes the strategic significance of these resources. He proposes leveraging them to bolster the U.S. arms industry. This approach aligns with his America First policy. It prioritizes American economic interests and military strength. However, critics argue that this approach is exploitative and short-sighted. They warn that it could perpetuate conflict and instability. Relying on Ukrainian resources for arms production could also create dependencies that harm U.S. interests in the long run.